Okay. Let me know when we're ready, Miguel, and then we'll get started.
We are ready, Mr. Board President.
Thank you, Miguel. Okay, everyone, I just want to welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for joining us. I, Antonio Martinez, President of the Governing Board, would like to call this special board meeting to order at 5:01. And I would like to ask that all board members mute their devices at this time. Trustees of the San Isidro School District Board and the public shall participate in this meeting via teleconference. The public may view the open session part of this meeting by accessing the YouTube link provided on the agenda. To listen in Spanish, please call 862-246-7734 and enter the access code 771-278-277#. Para escuchar esta junta en español, por favor llame al 862-246-7734 y ingrese el código de acceso 771-278-277 y signo de gato. Members of the public are welcome to record this meeting using their own personal devices. Prior to roll call, I would like to make it clear for the record of this meeting that it should be reflected in the minutes that this governing board meeting is conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-2920. Dr. Potter, can you lead us to roll call, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Calling for the roll call, agenda item number 2, beginning with Board Member Irene Lopez.
Present.
And Board Member Humberto Grumilan.
Here.
And Board Clerk Rosalia Palasigue.
Present.
Board Vice President Rudy Lopez.
Here.
And Board President Mr. Martinez.
Present.
Mr. President, all board members are here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Potter. We do have a quorum. I would like to now request that each board member respond to the following questions. We're going to start with board member Ms. Lopez. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes, I have.
Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. We're going to move on to Mr. Gurmilan. Mr. Gurmilan, can you hear me well?
Yes, Mr. Martinez.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes,
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gurmilan. Clerk Palasigue, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Yes.
Thank you, Clerk Palasigue. Vice President Lopez, can you hear me well?
I can.
Were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
I could, even the pregame.
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Okay, we're going to move on to number 3, which is the flag salute. Please join me in the salute to our flag. We'll be displaying a picture of the flag on the screen. And I would ask those in the meeting, including the other board members, to please mute to avoid feedback during the salute. Okay, I'll lead the salute. Everyone put your right hand over your heart and ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to agenda. I would like to get a motion to approve the agenda.
I make the motion.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mrs. Lopez, a second by Mrs. Palasigue. The only modification I would like to make for the agenda is to have public comment be read before Mr. DiCamillo's presentation. That way, at least he can hear it before he makes the presentation. And then if more comments come in after, then what we'll do is we'll read it after Mr. DiCamillo's presentation as well. But at this point, I would, at least from that end of it, approve the agenda with that modification, if it's okay. Okay, Dr. Potter, can you lead us in roll call vote for the agenda, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Calling for the roll call vote to approve the agenda, which is item number 4, beginning with Board Member Irene Lopez,
Yes.
Board Member Humberto Gurmilan,
Aye.
Board Clerk Rosalia Palasigue,
Yes.
Board Vice President Rudy Lopez,
Aye.
and Board President Antonio Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. President, the vote passes 5-0.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. Okay, we're going to move on to general administration number 5, and we're going to go on to 5.1, which is the virtual town hall meeting to seek community and stakeholder input regarding the development of the long-range master facility plan, specifically our Beyer site. We have with us WLC Architects Incorporated President, Mr. Jim DiCamillo, who will facilitate the virtual town hall meeting. But prior to that, I want us to do public comment on the issue at hand. So I'll give it to Mr. Mata, who will be reading that public comment. And just to
Thank you, Mr.
emphasize to everyone too, everyone who's listening still has until 6 p.m. tonight to submit public comment. So you can either use the link that we have or actually submit an email. So at the email that's listed there. Mr. Mata, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Mr. President, board, cabinet, guests, and viewers. The first public comment is from Ruth Maron, Beyer, regarding the Beyer school site. Dear district, I would like the Beyer school site to hopefully be a dog park. We currently don't have a dog park in San Isidro. I take my dog to Roar Park in Bonita. Many residents don't have yards and live in apartments, and it would be nice if it was a separate large dogs from small dogs. An open air exercise equipment area would also be nice since so many gyms are closed. And benches with barbecue area, basketball court, or tennis courts. Soccer field would also be nice. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you at the upcoming virtual town hall meeting. Sincerely, Naomi Ruth Maron. Second comment, Ricardo Herrera. Suggestion. I have a suggestion involving community development. My suggestion is to create a state-of-the-art facilities where you can develop youth or even adults in technical career fields such as welding, electrical, plumbing, healthcare, cybersecurity, computer programming, and entrepreneurship development. Many of these programs can be funded through NSA, HHS, DOL, DARPA, and many other federal or state agencies that offer grants for such programs and activities. The site's construction and development can also be partially or fully funded through federal grant opportunities specific to community development. This would create vast opportunities and promote economic growth in the community. We have plenty of organizations that help low-income community members to seek benefits and help. Still, we lack organization and programs to advance their careers and gain employment. An example of smaller scale programs like the ones I'm suggesting is a 3D printing program at our local library. Partnerships can be built with local businesses to provide apprenticeships opportunities in many of the education areas I described. Best regards, Ricardo Herrera. Next comment, Frank Najera, Beyer site uses. Dear board members, thank you for sending the mail notification. I rarely get an invitation as a sole homeowner, taxpayer, and thank you for being included. I have 43 years in the construction industry and have worked for multifamily developers over the past 12 of those 42 years. I have both technical experience and development insight to help spur a few thoughts. Looking at the aerial views and street views, the site is centrally located and close to major shopping, industrial, and the coastline. The location and the existing utilities create the easiest avenue for future development. Since this property is an old fill site, the soils, I would guess, are not the best for building heavy structures. Most developers would take all of the or most unsuitable clay soils and dump them into fill sites, then quote, give them to school districts. My guess is their soils will need a competent analysis to determine constructability. Second, the old schools were once in practice of burying trash or incinerating trash. Again, a thorough environmental test report needs to be conducted to determine chemicals, burn ash, or asbestos containing materials. Also, maintenance crews could have also dumped motor oils, pesticides, and other industrial waste. My broad experience on school sites, new and modernization leads me to urge you to spend the money or good environmental studies before further development. What to do with the land? I'd recommend you sell it. Yes, sell it. Once you've cleared all the hurdles on cleaning the property, there are plenty of local developers or nonprofit developers that could build affordable housing and or market rate townhomes and or apartments. Based on the available zoning, this will bring in more families, support our local economy, and fill our schools with fresh new students eager to learn. In development, when we sell one of our communities, we utilize those monies to buy more property or upgrade our older communities to the next level. Same for the district. Reinvest in your existing facilities, perform long forgotten deferred maintenance, and get ahead of the curve for one. I feel I may have enlightened the board a bit with my industry knowledge and hope you come up with a good choice. Please, no park or district headquarters. Stay lean and mean. Sincerely, Frank Najera. Next comment, Elizabeth G. Mi solicitud. She wrote it in Spanish. I'll read it in English. Truly, in my opinion, there are many parks. What we really need in this community is a sports center, kind of like a gym where youth can play sports and release stress due to this pandemic situation. Or more centers for children with special needs, because I have an autistic child and it is very difficult to calm his anxieties. I have seen a lot of improvement in my son with exercise and sports, especially boxing, but classes are very expensive. I haven't been able to pay for them for him, but he has a team. In conclusion, we thank you for thinking about our youth and children. Next comment, Santiago Rodriguez, buyer site suggestion. Good evening. Considering there is a demand for housing in San Isidro and there isn't any specifically dedicated to college students, and considering the difficulties faced by transborder students who have less access to education due to their housing situation, I would suggest that the buyer site is used to provide affordable housing for low-income students. As an alternative, a police station would be helpful to tackle the increasing crime in the area. Thanks, Santiago. Number 6, Ms. Alicia Jimenez, buyer school site. Again, Ms. Jimenez wrote it in Spanish, and I will read it in English. Hello, good morning, members of the San Isidro School District School Board. I am Alicia Jimenez, a resident of San Isidro for over 30 years. My daughters and son attended Beyer Elementary School, and it was very sad for us to see it taken from the ground up. Talking to Antonio Martinez about the vacant lot where the Beyer School was, I let him know that I was an old resident, that as an old resident would like to see that the land used in part for the elderly or senior citizens of San Isidro to have a small garden where they can sunbathe. Also, they could share time with other people doing gardening work. In the back of the lot, cherry trees brought from Japan were planted a long time ago. I can see that some of those trees are still exist, and it would be great to start for the garden. Our senior citizens, especially now with the pandemic, do not have much opportunity to go out and live with nature. I think this would be a good place for those people who gave so much of themselves could have their own little place to call their own, where they could plant vegetables and, why not, share them with the humble people in the community. Thank you for listening to my suggestions. I congratulate you for the work you do. I thank you for the support you have always given to Hearts and Hands, working together, organization that I manage, and I hope to continue working with you for a long time to come, God willing. Sincerely, Alicia Jimenez. Next comment, Jose Amada, buyer property. Good evening, Superintendent Potter, President Martinez, and board members. Today, I submit my thoughts on the subject of what is the future of the property of the former Beyer Elementary School. First, I wish to say, Dr. Potter, that the school board members that are now governing the SYSD are a special group of members, each with their own expertise. Since it's been 9 years since the school was destroyed, this community has been in limbo, and now the decision to build on this property is to deliver what will heal that time and to build what will bring the community together. Since this site has $1 million view, then $1 million response is needed. Since SYSD is fortunate that it sits on the border with a wealth that surrounds it, the international business that can support what is needed. Second, this school year has been like no other. The SYSD teachers and staff have learned to teach like never before, so they are ready to teach out of the box to take the students into the future. Third, I wish to say that the Beyer Elementary School is the only school that has a poem dedicated to them in the US. Salute to the smiling faces of the 21st century. That's a quote unquote. By the international poet, Dr. Daisuke Ikeda. In this poem, Dr. Ikeda wrote regarding education to develop global citizenship. In the poem, which reflects what needs to be built on the Beyer property, is to build something for the future of the SYSD community that will bring a light to the school district too. I suggest a summit of the business community, SYSD chamber, political, the San Diego City Council, and nonprofits and community leaders, as well as the labor community. This way, whatever decision is made, it is the best what can be built on this precious property. There is no need to hurry since the community has waited this long. It can wait to have the best school built here. I've researched futuristic schools, so I suggest you, the school district, see what other communities are doing and have what can be accomplished. Out of the box thinking will bring a future decision. Thank you for listening. Josephine T. Amada, retired Beyer teacher, 10 years. The next comment is also from Ms. Josie M. Amada, Beyer property. I wish to add that the poem dedicated to Beyer Elementary School was from the founder of Soka University of America in Orange County, whereas we speak, it's being used as a mega location for the COVID issue. Josephine T. Amada. Next comment, Lisa Cuestas, Beyer side public comment. Hello, my name is Lisa Cuestas, CEO of Casa Familiar. We are strong advocates for permanent affordable housing and would like to offer that as a suggestion. Given the school district's high rates of homeless youth and families, I think a housing model that would integrate both long-term and transitional supportive housing would be an interesting model that helps address high need. Certain kinds of housing financing can be very restrictive, so I would recommend connecting with trusted housing partners to explore options and identify the kinds of funds that would allow the district to serve the existing demographics of youth and families you currently have and are in need of housing. Thank you for receiving public input on this matter. Regards, Lisa Cuestas, CEO, Casa Familiar. The next public comment, Zaira Gutierrez, Beyer site comments. My name is Zaira Gutierrez. I used to attend Beyer Elementary School and graduated class of '89. We moved to San Diego when I was 6 years old from Los Angeles to start in a fresh new house with a new neighborhood and, most importantly, a new school. Beyer Elementary is not only my school. I have fond childhood memories of walking down the open hallway with concrete walkways and grassy spacing between each building. I remember looking at kids in other classrooms and thought the open classroom door as well as the kid who wandered the halls, peeking into classrooms, thinking no one was watching. I grew up in San Isidro, moved away for a few years and returned to find my childhood school demolished. I, like others, was heartbroken and left wondering what happened. Why did it happen? Who let it happen? And where's the new school? Also, in 1988, we buried a time capsule created by all the students then with lots of love and dedication in a ceremonial event with a promise to dig up and look back. Lots to say. Zaira Gutierrez. Final comment, David Martinez. Hi, I'm submitting my comments, suggestions for the Buyer site. My suggestions are: 1, community pump track with an area for the youth to perform mechanical repairs on the bicycles. 2, outdoor radio control track and radio control crawler track with an area for the youth to perform mechanical repairs on the radio controlled cars. 3, community technology outreach facility where the youth can build high-tech instruments and use them to learn from them, or a facility where the youth can practice using high-tech equipment being used in San Diego City jobs. 4, community garden with arts and crafts facility. 5, San Isidro Museum with community rooms for community presentations, and an amphitheater for presentations. Please let me know if you have any questions or if clarification is needed. Thank you. And that concludes all the public comments, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mata. Do we have any telephonic comments at this time?
Not at this moment. I will defer to Mr. Miguel Ortega. I don't think we have any, but if I'm wrong, please, he would have notified me, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mata. We're actually gonna, so first of all, I want to thank everyone who was able to submit their comment. And just I want to add that I know that even if those who weren't able to submit a comment, we'll have the email available for people to use in case they still want to do so even after this meeting. We're going to move on to 5.1, which is the presentation by Mr. DiCamillo. He's the president of WLC Architects. Mr. DiCamillo, you're on.
Let me turn my unmute button on. Good evening, everybody, and those listening online or here in the Zoom session. I'm Jim DiCamillo, president of WLC Architects, and I've been hired by the school district to assist them or guide them and the community in general through a long-range facility master plan process. That is not a process where, although I'm an architect, we design buildings, but it's really a longer range plan. It's looking at all the facilities across the district and setting up essentially a road trip tick to say, okay, if we're going to do things in the next 10 to 15 years, what are some of the things we'll want to do so we can do them in a strategic planning way rather than coming up against things just in an emergency way. Let's do things in a planned out way. And so we've been working with the district for about a year, and including many meetings, unfortunately, most of them over Zoom or some virtual platform. And each meeting has been focused generally either on a topic or a site. This particular meeting is one of a series of town hall meetings that we've had all across the district, most of which have focused, of course, on existing school sites. And we've ask the community for their input on what they would want to see for improvements at their school, knowing that many of those people have kids at the school. We've had meetings with the principal of each school. We've had meetings with the staff at each school, just finished those last week. The Buyer site is unique because there isn't a principal and there isn't a staff and there aren't any students, but there is a community. And that's the reason for the meeting this evening is the audience of the community to look and for the same type of input of are there any things that people would see as a long-term plan for what used to be a school and is now property. And this is not foreign to us in master planning. Oftentimes we are looking at future sites of schools, the schools and neighborhoods that aren't built yet, And occasionally we're looking to repurpose a school site. Many districts all across California have buildings that used to be school sites, but are now actually used as something else. They could be a district office, they could be a central kitchen, they could be just about anything that school districts would have. So I'm going to go into this presentation by starting to screen share, and I'm going to pray that I can. Let's see here, make sure I share the right screen, and hopefully you can see that screen. I see a nodding head. Can you see a big map of the school district?
Yes.
Yes. So many on this call might have also been on this same call. We had a similar meeting regarding Beyer before the holidays and decided with the input that we got that we should come back and revisit the topic. So I'm going to go through the first part of this slideshow very quickly and then get to the meat of it, hoping to catch up people who maybe did not participate in that first meeting. So the reason I share this slide, and I've used it throughout the district, is to show that all of the San Ysidro schools are all literally on the far western edge of the school district. And so those who aren't that familiar, your school district is very large and extends far to the east of what you think of as the core in the far western corner. Now, the other reason that I share this slide is because not only are they all in the far western corner of the school district, but because of that, they're all very close together. And so all of the schools, the blue is the elementary schools, the green are the middle schools, and of course, sort of dead center is Beyer as a district support center. It's literally right in the middle of the school district. Why is that important? Because it's not that far to drive to any of the sites from the other sites. So for the Beyer discussion, it makes one wonder if there are facilities there that if we put something there, as opposed to at the far eastern boundary of the school district that you just saw on the last slide, if we put something at Beyer, is it easy for the district to get to? And I believe the answer is yes, that the Beyer site is relatively central to the school district. And in fact, it's rare that I work in a district where the sites are this close to each other. So whatever we do at Beyer will either be seen by, driven by, used by just about everybody in the San Ysidro School District.
Mr. DiCamillo, going back to that previous slide,
Yeah.
just to let you know that you need to make a correction with Willow School. It's a K-6.
Yeah, with Willows. Yes, it is. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. And by the way, Beyer is this little thing right here above that little beige patch right there is Beyer. Now, as I've explained in many meetings, the facility master plan is one of gathering input. And in other words, I don't come with a solution. I come with a lot of questions to this process. And we've been gathering input, as I mentioned earlier, from the district, from individual school sites. We haven't had much from students, although I would love if we could. And we've interfaced just a touch with some of the government agencies. What are government agencies? That's, your schools are not owned by the city, so the school sites are adjacent to city streets and city parks, and there are some joint use activities. And the key to this meeting, however, is this audience in the middle, which is the community. And is there any input that the community would give us? And as we now know from hearing the reading of the suggestions that were gained before this meeting, the answer is yes. There's actually quite a few people in the community who were kind enough to take a few minutes to write down some ideas. Now, most of the meetings we've had have focused on these primary challenges, and although these are more site specific, I'm going to try and relate them to Beyer specifically here. You might wonder, well, why would any of this be important to a bare patch of land? The reason is because most school districts right now in 2021 are dealing with a few challenges that are specific, but many that are very sort of across the board or universal to school districts. And it might be that a solution for Beyer would tackle one of these challenges that the school district is having. In other words, the solutions don't have to occur at a school site. It might be that something that the district is facing as a challenge could be solved at Beyer. And that might be, some obvious things. Somebody mentioned early on in the public comment about technology and having a facility that really ups the game of the district regarding technology. Another comment, they didn't know it, was regarding evolution, which is to create a facility there that would be forward thinking or forward looking and dealing with things that you could do from a blank piece of property that might be harder to do if you were trying to modify an existing facility. And then another one that I heard that maybe they didn't know when they were saying it is one of parity, and that is that could we do something at Beyer that would bring a sense of parity across the district? And that might, parity again, I've used this at every presentation, is not equality. Parity would be in the terms of Beyer, is there a facility that we could create there that all of San Ysidro could access so that it wasn't specific to a neighborhood, but was a center that could allow parity to occur in a completely different way, that said if I needed to use a facility, there is one provided within the San Ysidro School District, and therefore I create parity with one move of the chess piece, as opposed to trying to populate the whole district with these sorts of facilities, maybe a district center of some kind that everybody could access. So those are the challenges that most districts face. And those who have seen this presentation before know that there are different ways to meet those challenges with facilities. And those are build, renovate, improve, and upgrade. And I don't think it's a stretch to read into the public comment or read from the public comment that many of these were actually touched upon in the public comment. A few people in the public spoke to building something new. I won't go through the list that was just read, but you'll see some of it in a minute. And obviously the whole concept of rebirthing Beyer, the whole idea is to renovate something old, which is the property itself. And clearly there were quite a few who mentioned improving the property itself, the site, the grounds, park, an area for people to gather, that sort of thing. So improving the site and grounds seems like the perfect remedy for Beyer. And then lastly, and it wasn't specifically said, I think it's clear that anything that you would do at Beyer would include all of the accoutrements of a 21st century environment. Now, I will say, and let me just back up for the audience in general and the board and everybody else on the call, is one must remember that there are limitations. And you heard some of that from the public comment. They maybe just didn't really understand what those limitations really are. And they're bounded by the boundaries of measure T and U, at least for this purpose, which is to say, if you would use San Ysidro School District local bond measure funds, those funds are not open-ended. They do have limits, and the bonds measure T and U are both governed or observed by a citizens oversight committee who will ensure for the public, for the taxpayers, that the money from those bonds are spent for specific improvements. In other words, you can't, now that you passed your bonds, you can't do whatever you want. You have to do things that could be at least loosely interpreted as the yellow highlighted things that are listed here, meaning safety in school, site school security improvements, upgrading classrooms, technology, and importantly, construct, rehabilitate, acquire, equip, and furnish classrooms and school facilities. So remember, I said one of the things you can do with the Beyer site is build something new. And as you see in the yellow highlighting, the bond measure T, and you'll see the next slide is bond measure U, actually does allow you to construct, equip, and furnish classroom and school facilities. However, I think it might be a stretch to look to build something that could not be interpreted as a classroom or school facility, obviously. So I want to keep everybody mindful of that. Now, Measure U is very similar in language, except it places a higher emphasis on reconstructing roofs and plumbing and all of the fixtures and equipment that run the school, but it comes back to the same sort of rehabilitation to acquire, equip, and furnish classrooms and school facilities. So I think hopefully everybody on the call and the board and everybody will remember that if you are to use Measure T and U funds for this, they are both earmarked for classroom and school facilities. There has to be a nexus there in anything that the district would do. Now, you may remember these slides. I kind of find them interesting to see. These are straight off the satellite, and this was Beyer in 2011 and shows what fit on the property. And I'm going to talk about, and one of the reasons for having this presentation is to give you a little bit better idea of how much land is still there, because these are bigger pieces of property, and unless you walk around on the site, maybe your only knowledge of site is from Beyer Boulevard. You know, you never actually even been on the property or walked around it. But that was Beyer in 2011, its last, year basically. And interestingly enough, if you search back through Google Earth, you will find you actually can see them bulldozing the site, demolishing the site in 2012. I thought this was one of the more fascinating pictures I've ever seen. And if I'm a betting man, I'm going to guess this may be that orchard that somebody wrote about in the public comment. I'm thinking that might actually be it. So that is how the site looked when it was literally in the midst of demolition in 2012. And now again, for those who haven't been by there recently, this is what it looks like now. Now it's important to note that the site is not flat, as many parts of San Ysidro are not. The site isn't level, and though you can fly over it from the air, from many thousands of feet in a satellite, it kind of flattens everything. It's important to know that the property isn't flat. So if that's what it looked like today, you start to look at what are the opportunities and options for it for the future. Now, the buildable area of the site, which is this trapezoid in the middle, again, this is mostly for planning and scale, is about 7 acres. It's a little under 7 acres. And that includes this trapezoid, including the cherry trees, apparently. And to give you a sort of a frame of reference, your typical elementary school sits on, classically, all over California, sits on 10 acres. And so this is a 7-acre site. So as you know, Beyer was not a large site for an elementary school. We've built schools on 1.5 acres, believe it or not, but 10 is sort of the standard by the California Department of Ed. Similarly, then for a K-8 district, a middle school or junior high sits on about 20 acres classically. And for those, you can sort of interpolate up, a high school was always on 40 acres. I can give you all the reasons why that is, but those are some real key numbers to remember in terms of frame of reference for a school district. An elementary sits on 10, a junior high 20, and a high school on 40. And it varies either side, but something like that. Now, again, remember too that Beyer is not flat. And although there is a plateau, which is that trapezoid, believe it or not, there's almost 4 stories of fall from the north to the south down Beyer Boulevard. It's if the middle of the site is, we'll call that at 0, where this arrow is, and is one of the old driveways to Beyer, then the top of the site, the street, is literally falling 4 stories from the top to the bottom. And that's pretty hard to understand when you're out there, but it does tell you that there's only a couple of places where the site, in my terminology, daylights onto Beyer Boulevard. And that's here, basically at these 2 points. After that, this is a large slope to traverse to get down almost 20 feet, almost 2 stories to get down. And if you're wondering what this big and green swath is, for those who aren't familiar with the site, that is a hill. There is a major hill behind this property that is 3, 4, 5 stories tall behind the property. So even though the district's property line is actually not this yellow line and includes actually some of the hill, the site itself is more or less unusable beyond that yellow line because of the grade change that occurs. Now, on the far right-hand side of the slide, interesting enough, I did not type this while the public comment was coming in, although I could have. If you see the suggestions that were brought out at the last meeting, they included the things that are listed here on the right-hand slide, which were primarily, district support facility sites seem to rise to the top. What's a district support facility? It's a facility, again, remember, something that a school district uses, but is not a neighborhood elementary school. In other words, these are facilities that everybody in the district, remember that central theme again, would be able to come and access at the site. And those could be anything from a district multi-purpose facility. All districts are hurting for these larger gathering spaces for training, public community meetings, and the like. And then family resource centers has been mentioned a lot, a place for almost adult education, adult training, all of that. There's been some talk about all districts struggle with special education centers, and where should that be located? Should it be central so that everybody can get to it, or do you, separate those out, all populate those all throughout the district? There was even talk last time about a center for uses that, and here's where you bridge into things that the bond really isn't structured for, centers for things that are not really pertaining to a school district, which is like, community centers and homeless center housing and the like. And the reason I bring up the last one is simple. This is a master plan, not a design. And so what the school district, I think, is charged to do here is, with 7 buildable acres, and you heard it in the public comment, somebody said sell it. And so it may be that the answer is a little of both, or a little of all. That you would reserve parts of this property for something else. You might reserve some of it for selling. You might only build on a portion of it, and you might build a site that is made up of multiple facilities. It doesn't have to be just one big thing. It can actually be built out in phases or set aside for later. But keep this diagram in mind, because it does give you a little bit of an idea. It is not, it's not Kansas. It's not flat as a pool table, and its access to the property is not, everywhere along the street frontage. So as a quick rule of thumb, I laid out these 2, quick layouts here that suggest that if you were to do something, the areas that are beyond the red arrows they almost obviously divide the site into 2 main parcels, sort of a 2.5 acre parcel at the north and about a 4.5 acre parcel at the south. Now, once again, you might be asking, well, Jim, what fits on a 2.5 acre parcel? How do we know what that is? Well, let me give you an example. Back in the day, we were talking about some of the other district support sites that are not schools, the things that are not an elementary school. The district office site is about that size. The CDC is about that size. The bigger piece, that is about the size of those facilities. You don't really own anything that's in the development size, at least not that I'm aware of, that's down in the 2.5 acre size. But those properties that you know of, that the district has, or maybe the public knows of, those are more in the 4.5 acre size, the district office or the CDC. And I'm not saying to build those things here. I'm just saying that's about the size that those developments are. So if you were to look at this then and say, okay, well, what would something like that look like, Jim? It looks like this. So if you were to build something on 2.5 acres, well, what fits on 2.5 acres? It fits about a 18, 20,000 square foot building, maybe a multi-purpose center, maybe, as I said in the previous slide, a master facility family services center, and about 100 parking stalls. So if you were to look, this is parking on the left, for those who understand my crude diagram, and a building on the right with access off of Beyer. That's about how big of a facility actually fits on that property. So what does that mean? That means if you were to park 100 parking stalls, you could build a multi-purpose center that would seat 300 people. The ratio is 1 to 3 throughout the city. That is the proportion, for example, that a church or community center uses. A seating capacity of 300 in a major gathering space needs about 100 parking stalls. Would that fit on that 2.5 acres? Yes, it would. That's about how big a facility like that would be. And you can imagine if you did the same down below, then you would obviously potentially have more, or you might be able to build a facility that had more open space. And it was mentioned in the public comment that maybe that would be even greater now. Maybe it's still 100 parking stalls and a larger structure with support facilities, but it would also have a lot more outdoor space. In other words, it wouldn't just be a parking lot in a building. It could be a parking lot and some outdoor area for whatever uses, and many of them were mentioned in the public comment. So getting back full circle, it begins to say, okay, well, Jim, if this is not a design, this is a diagram, or what we call how much stuff fits on the property. So what you're looking at here is about 200, 220 parking stalls altogether, and then facilities in the range of 20 to 30 to 40,000 square feet. which is not that different from the size of a smaller elementary school, but again, not large enough to do some of the things that were mentioned in the public comment. So for example, if I was to go back a couple of slides, you could put a soccer field here, but it would take up the entire parcel. That's how large a soccer field is. It's a little bit unnerving sometimes, but some of these facilities are bigger than others. So yeah, I mean, you can see the building is actually smaller than the parking lot. Parking lots are big, buildings are small. Fly over a Home Depot and you're going to know that parking is bigger than buildings. So with that said, I think what it's showing is that there are many, many options for the buyer site. It's a big enough property to develop. Here's the takeaway. It's a big enough property to probably develop 2, maybe 3 different uses, none of which would be a school because it's probably not big enough for a school, but it would be big enough to either do 1, 2, or 3 district support facilities. And it definitely would be big enough to do a single well-planned district support facility and then leave the other acreage for something that you don't even know about yet, or even sell for that matter to another use, or even just have another use come in and fund the rest of that development. But going back to the language of the bond, anything you would fund out of Measure T and U would have to look, smell, or sound more like a facility like this. Hopefully all of that made sense and gives you a lot more idea of just how big of a property this actually is and what might fit on it.
Mr. DiCamillo, may I ask a question since you have your map up? And maybe it's a different slide where the yellow line was, I think, of the hill, of the green line. Behind the property, the city of San Diego's spoken many times about the development of a park of some sort behind or adjacent to this property. What parcel does the city own?
I don't know specifically, but the open land would be the property to the east back here. And you can see there's actually some trails on it and the like. Yeah, I am going to try and do something here and see if you can actually see this. We tried this beforehand and let's see if I can do it. It may flicker and we're a little worried about it flickering. So let me know if it does. So this is the buyer site. Now it's interesting, that's it looking down. But if I do this like a science fiction movie, you can see it's now in 3D. That's the plateau, that's the mountain. And it's significant, it is not flat. And so if I do this, there is that thing we just showed.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
And there is the other one. Very, very simple program, but I think the 3D nature of it really helps to bring it home. And again, I'll try not to cause you all to go blind, but that you can see that building, this is all to scale horizontally and vertically. That's the hill. It's not small. I'm actually working with Oceanside School District right now, and they have a facility very similar to this that they're looking at. And they were talking about Dr. Potter connecting this property to this property. And I said, unless you have an escalator or a tow rope, you ain't getting up there. It is a long way.
It's more like a mountain.
Yeah, it's like I call it like the wave that hit the Titanic. When you see it right there, iceberg straight ahead. So while the map makes it look flat, this is to scale horizontally and vertically. So that is like a 1-story building. This may be a taller multi-purpose building. And you can see if I keep tipping up, it is way taller than the building. It's way up there, that plateau. Hopefully that helps to rationalize this a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Mr. DiCamillo. Do we have any questions from the board? Or comments, thoughts? Okay, we'll start with, I'll just name people. Ms. Lopez, do you have any thoughts?
I just, that part of the hill, it's it's also adjacent to the homes up there. So
That's up
actually-
here. Mhm.
Yeah. But that land would not be in any way be able for us to tear it down and utilize it. I mean, or buy it, but I think, no, we were not in that. But I listened to some of the comments and I had an idea too also when I know that a lot of the people that went to Beyer resided before wanted to build another school.
Mhm.
The thing is that I don't think they realize that there is, well, I think all districts are suffering from attendance, really. We've had
Mhm.
a slight cut of
Yeah.
students, but we look at the future because we don't know how it's going to go later on. But I thought of somewhere of actually maybe special ed department for children, because we have them at each school, different types of special ed, severely handicapped. And I thought maybe this where we could put a building for those children and services for them. So instead of having them at each schools, they would be centralized in one spot. But I also thought, well, maybe the transportation would be another thing that we need to look at. The other thing I thought it was also for, there was somebody who mentioned about low income. Well, I don't really believe low income is well, yes, it is an issue, but I would like to see something, and I think Dr. Potter did hear what I'd like to see for some of the really homeless people that don't have where to stay, actually, that live with other families, and they land up still, and I see it, they land up in the park, in the streets with their kids, sleeping in cars to a certain degree. And I think that's something maybe we could see of, I don't mean build the whole property on it, but maybe help some families, maybe even as you were showing the building, I thought, why not make a 2-story
Mhm.
that they could have some housing for them. So they would have where to stay, where to attend our schools also at the same time. There's a lot of little things that, can go in place, but I know it takes time to really look at it and see what's really beneficial for the community and for the whole community.
Again, remember, my reading of your bond measures would say, and you'd have to consult bond counsel, but my reading of it would say you cannot build a facility with Measure T and U money to house homeless people. That's not allowed out of your bond money. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't, as I said earlier, it doesn't mean that you couldn't reserve some of the land. In other words, you could only build a facility for special ed kids, for example, on one part of it and leave the rest of it undeveloped for a future use funded else by some other source.
Mr. DiCamillo, would we be allowed to lease a portion of the land to an entity that would offer some shelter for homeless families?
Well, in regards to the Measure T and U language, it doesn't prohibit that, but leasing wouldn't cost anything. That would be income, not expense. So again, there you'd have to talk to legal counsel to say, can I lease facilities for, can I lease
Land. You
Right.
would lease land.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And I'm just gonna put my 2 cents about the affordable housing idea. Obviously it's a need. The only concern I have related to having it at this specific site is that ultimately, when whatever organization builds the affordable housing, they do that, right? So let's pretend that happened. I don't know if there's an actual guarantee or a condition that we can put that actually is affordable housing reserved for families that are in our school district, students in our school districts that are transitional homeless. There really, I don't know if there is that. I mean, highly unlikely, given that it is affordable housing and individuals that move there can stay there, obviously. But the thought about anything that's not school related is that, this land was a school. And when it was torn down, what was promised was an educational facility. So my initial thought of anything that's not an educational facility would be a disservice to the community and what was promised. And even though what was promised is before all of us, every single person on this call, that promise should be kept because this is our property. This is an educational property. So at least that's my 2 cents on affordable housing. And also obviously ideas to come, hopefully to narrow our focus to what we're going to do with it. But that's just my thought.
I echo your sentiments, Mr. Martinez. And well, I think that everyone here today has a heart for the community as a whole, but can we take what voters voted on to create educational facilities? Can we take that and turn it into something else in good conscience? So that's kind of where I land with that. However, I would really, and I know that we were approached some years back by a real estate developer that had turned some downtown property into multi-living. I think it was a buyback, or you just sell the land or deed the land over to the investor, developer, and they turn it into a school, but it really is just it's a preschool, not just a preschool to minimize it, but it was a preschool / apartment complex / resource center, community resource center. But again, that's a whole nother scenario that I don't know that we've spoken. I don't believe we've had any formal conversations with any type of entities of that sort. While we are in a season of declining enrollment, that could change. We just don't know. So will we need a school down the road? We might, and in good faith, hopefully we will. But
and Leah, just to add, when I mean an educational facility, I don't necessarily mean an elementary school. Frankly, my initial thought, at least going into this presentation, was a preschool / special ed education center. That, if we want to talk decline enrollment, our decline enrollment in preschool has declined this year, obviously because of the pandemic. But imagine a state-of-the-art, brand new facility for special ed kids, and imagine
that's a dream come true.
And imagine that for also our preschool kids, and if anything, that would bring my hope would bring some more students.
Right. I agree with, I know Ms. Lopez, you mentioned that earlier also. I mean, a state-of-the-art facility for, our needs, our SPED students and educators would just be phenomenal. And I know that there's needs all across the board. There's a lot of niches that could be filled, but, again, per Mr. DiCamilo's reminder, kind reminder, we have restrictions, on the bond money. So we need to be very wise. And, but I echo Ms. Lopez's and Mr. Martinez's comments on this and input on this indefinitely. But I was thinking also, and I do think Ms. Lopez mentioned something to this effect already, but possibly some type of extended learning, career development. I know we don't have a high school, but and I'm not sure that that's something that we're wanting as a school district to venture into. I don't know that this space is large enough for that, but something that we could provide our middle school students, just a place to go and learn things. Who's going to run it? I don't know. Who's going to fund that ongoing programming? Because you have a facility, and then there's all this talk of it's not just a facility, but there has to be program implementation to follow it. So that's a whole nother animal. But I love the idea of with the use of our existing employment infrastructure, gosh, a really, really awesome SPED campus would be, and preschool campus. Our preschool is old.
And I would suggest to the group that, and this is why I did not divide the site equally, it was on purpose. I would suggest to the group that if you were looking at a facility of that nature, it's probably that one. Yeah, that it would consume probably that much of the site. And of course, it could be up at the north, but it would not be the smaller of the two. Facility like a couple of you have mentioned would be the bigger of the two in terms of acreage. Preschool and special ed facility would be the larger of the two, more like a 4.5 acre development, not the 2.5 acre development. This here is a pretty small building and development that's not large enough to do those things. It would probably be more like this. And if you even cobble together a third or fourth thing that is desperately needed, it would take the whole site, the whole 7 acres.
And I'll add that with the Special Education Resource Center, if we probably could run it as a resource center. However, to run it to aggregate all the students to one location, that becomes problematic with the laws that require mainstreaming of students with general education students, because then they feel like we've isolated them to a school on their own and they don't have opportunities to be with their like peers.
Yes.
And so I think we could do a resource center type of hub for them, but not pull them out of their schools with their peers.
Great. Perfect. How about Mr. Gurmilan, Mr. Lopez? Any comments, thoughts? Mr. Gurmilan?
I'll go first, and then thank you, Mr. DiCamillo. I really appreciate this graphic that you brought this time. I think it really, visually, it just helps a lot. Also want to thank everybody that provided a comment today. I think it's great to hear it. And one of the things that I'm getting just from the whole series of meetings that we've had for this site is I think we're getting now to the bottom of it. And I think it's really exciting. I think one thing that makes our decision a little bit easier in terms of certain things is that the park is going to be built hopefully in the future on the, very close. And we don't need to create any soccer fields or any recreational space, because that's going to be happening pretty close by. Although I really think affordable housing is a huge topic and a huge issue in our community, I also believe that we should definitely strongly consider focusing on the educational aspects. I would love to have, dozens and dozens of families that have children in our district there, but I think it's not going to be feasible because of space and all the other issues that might be brought for the reasons that you mentioned, my colleagues mentioned, and you were talking about. So I think I would love, and I think I would be strongly in favor of a building or buildings that support either our special ed program, our child development, but also would like to. I think that a facility that would bring in students from all the campuses, where if it's a multi-purpose facility where they can come and do, theater, some of the things that were mentioned in our public comment, maybe just some other types of activities that are going to be educational, but also getting them ready for either high school or a step above in terms of their education. So I think I'm really excited. I think we're getting down to some really great options. I love the input from the community, and I really would love to see, like I said, just really focus on education. I agree with the comments made before about focusing on that and really just bringing all over the campuses or all the students from the whole district to be able to come down and meet and engage in activities and learning, and that would be just a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Gurmilan. How about you, Mr. Lopez?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. DiCamillo. I really like the 3D rendering process. I'm gonna like dropping stuff in there and seeing what fits. I also agree with educational facilities, like a centric facility where students would come and maybe I've brought up before that the STEM maybe it could be a STEM center. But also, I like that you were able to drop 2 different sized facilities that maybe served 2 different purposes, and again, maybe some centralized district services. I don't want to discount anything that has been brought up either. For example, I had never thought about it. I had also initially thought about housing, but I'm glad that you brought us back and said, well, E&U can't be used for that purpose. So that's that's something that we need to keep in mind. I also, a couple of people mentioned technical education. And I also want us, to think outside of our own little bubble and think that across the street, we have the adult center that maybe we could partner with that already offers some kind of technical education. And maybe we could partner with them and use some of their classroom space, and maybe that would be good for them as well. But again, I like educational services, and I like centralized district services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. And I just want to let everybody know that I received a comment, a text actually from the chair of the San Ysidro Planning Group, Mr. Michael Friedman. And he basically clarified that the property on the eastern property line of the school, the top of the slope, is part of the Beyer Park General Development Plan, which has been approved by the city. So to answer that's it is city property. So I just want to thank Mr. Friedman, and that's another person that I think we should bring in. I know that we have a lot of comments, but I just can't emphasize enough his knowledge of everything San Ysidro. So I just want to thank him for sending me that. But other than that, do we have any other comments, thoughts?
I was just gonna add, I forgot, we could probably use that. We could probably use that hill to create some slides for our children to have fun. So we can do that.
We want to compete with the water park that's close by, right? I also know that we did receive public comment. I know right now it's past 6, but we did receive some comment. So let's move on to that for right now. And maybe Mr. Mata, if you can read those, the emails that you've received, or the public comment that you've received.
I will, Mr. President. We did receive actually 3 more. And the first one is from Lucia Polanco Cruz, Beyer site suggestion. Good evening. I am a member of the San Ysidro community. I've been living here for 17 years now. I'm currently doing my MA degree in philosophy at San Diego State University. I want to give my opinion on what should be done with the Beyer site. I think it is time to do something to generate more opportunities for cultural enrichment for the entire community. Especially children and young adults need and must have a place to receive education on the arts and other essential fields. It is essential that the individuals, since a young age, get to explore their creativity through dancing, acting, music, and everything involving the arts. Unfortunately, all of these are extremely expensive. I used to dance ballet when I lived in Mexico, and my mother could not afford my ballet lessons anymore when we came to the United States because the costs were extremely expensive. I have been part of a mariachi group since I was in high school. I cannot emphasize enough how being part of this music group has enriched my soul and helped me keep my Mexican culture alive. Children lack these kinds of opportunities because we simply do not have the means to afford it. The best idea for the Beyer site is a place that is devoted to teaching arts to children, teenagers, and adults. The best thing we can do is make a place available for children to have dance lessons, theater, painting, ballet folklorico, singing, classic ballet, yoga, teach different languages, have reading groups, poetry, etc. It is time that we give children and every member of the community something of quality to do with their time. This will aid in the reduction of crime. It will generate future generations that have a richer culture. It will allow our community members to enrich their minds, pursue a love for learning and education, and it will help to better ourselves in ways that we cannot do due to lack of financial funds. Also, it will generate jobs for people who qualify for these positions as we can take volunteers. We do not need another store or coffee place. We need more affordable education and opportunities to grow. From my most humble place, I give my opinion because I do not want one more child to go through what I did, to lose the opportunity to explore their mind and creativity due to lack of money. Making these things affordable is the best we can do for our members to help them be more equipped and skilled in society. Also, to help them polish their minds and bodies. Thank you for your attention and feel free to contact me for further information in regards to this matter. I would love to volunteer and help in any way I can. Lucia Palanco Cruz. Next comment and is an added comment from Ricardo Herrera. To those listening, take into account that there's already a development plan, the city of San Diego, for a park in the area behind the school site. The park is supposed to include dog area, skate park, and many other recreation areas. And he did send a picture, and I don't know, I couldn't screen share, but I don't know if we can see it. He sent a picture of where the park is going to be, right next to San Isidro Middle School and adjacent also to the Beyer site. Okay, it'll be in the record. It'll be in the public comments on record. Best regards, Ricardo Herrera. Number 14, Pablo Davila. Hello, SYSD. I would like to bring the idea of a hybrid charter/school district, elementary, middle, or high school. This was achieved by the Prues School at UCSD. We would need to launch a board of trustees to plan/execute the plan of a charter school. This would be a school by the district and for the district with no outside influence and the only objective of a successful college track for students. And that ends the comments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mata. And I just want to let everybody know, for anyone who's listening, that that we're going to have obviously that email available. So if you didn't have a chance to, submit your comment today, please do so. I know that on Facebook there was a lot of talk. So maybe we can screenshot that Facebook page where I believe Mrs. Josie Hamada posted the question of, have people submit their comments. I guess it's easier to submit a comment on Facebook than it is to email, but for all those, I would still like to obviously take into consideration their thoughts. So we can share that with Mr. DiCamillo, that'd be great. I believe it's the page, What's Up San Isidro, if I'm not mistaken. And do we have any more comments for Mr. DiCamillo? I guess the one question I have, I guess for Mrs. Dr. Potter as well, is our next steps. I know that we've had a lot of these meetings, not just about Beyer, but about all of our educational facilities. What are the next steps, Dr. Potter, after this?
I'll defer to Mr. DiCamillo for the timeline for completion of the long-range master facility plan, and also at the same time thank him for doing many, many virtual town hall meetings. Mr. DiCamillo, can you let us know where you're at with visiting each of the schools, the staff at each school? Have you had an opportunity to visit all of our 7 schools and 1 preschool, or do you still have a few pending?
No, we've met with everybody. We've met with all the principals and all of the school site staff, the teachers, basically. The last one was a week ago at Ocean View Hills. So we're done. We've met with all of them. I'm just waiting now for the Google Docs to float in from all of your site staff to populate those suggestions. And those will then fill in sort of the background on the master plan. So the timeline on the master plan itself, now with this meeting in tow, is to try and get everything done in the next, let's say 6 to 8 weeks, basically, and have it all wrapped up, including diagrams and cost estimates and everything, to be able to allow then the board to see essentially a first draft of the master plan, so that you can get a better handle on the global picture of the district. And the board should think of this more like the way you do a budget, where you see a first draft, kind of look at it, make comments back, and then we will polish it up, and then you'll do sort of a final reading and adoption. So all of that, if it was just completely up to Jim DiCamillo, would occur in the spring here coming up. And we're ready for that. We've received input from all across the district now. We've met with every site at least 2, sometimes 3 times.
Mr. DiCamillo, when you are ready to share the first draft with the board, is that done typically in a special board meeting, a regular board meeting? How much time do you need?
Normally it's done in a regular board meeting. It's just a presentation like you would get from Maryland on the budget. It's the same way. It's just a reading and the document is given to you and you can take a look and ask as many questions as you like. But normally when I do this, it's done in open session at the regular board meeting. But those were in regular times.
That's what
I
I
was
was
just
gonna
from a
say.
time, I wasn't sure
how
if
you do
it's
it
more of
now.
a, I wasn't sure if it was more of a board workshop where we have dialogue.
It can be. It can be. That's really up to you. Most of the clients I work with, they do it at their regular session. I have had some where we do literally a Saturday workshop, and it's literally an
That's what I was wondering.
all day thing in which we go through it. So that's up to you. Yeah. It may be that the first reading will cause you to want to do a longer workshop, but it might be that you say, no, this all makes a lot of sense, and let's move forward with it from here, and we'll just tweak it at the next board meeting. My suggestion would be maybe do a first reading and then see what you think.
Mr. Martinez, our board
Yeah.
president, your thoughts?
Dr. Potter, before we continue with that, I do want to let us know, I do want to let everybody know that I received a text from Olga Espinosa saying that she did submit her public comment. I don't know if we're able to read that. If not, I have it. She texted to me so I can read it for the record.
Mr. Mata and Mr. Ortega, did we receive it?
I'm gonna update just now when I heard Mr. Martinez say that. Let me look and see if it's on here. I just updated it. And let me
Hi, Miss
check.
Espinosa.
And it's pretty long, so it's good. So that she has gives us a lot of ideas.
Yeah, Mr. Martinez, I don't know if Miguel is on the line, but it's not on my comment sheet. Mr. Ortega?
Mr. Mata, Mr. Board President, we haven't received anything as of yet.
Okay, well, I'm
Go
going to
ahead,
read it.
Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, I'm going to read it for the record. That way we have it for our minutes. This is a comment from Mrs. Olga Espinosa, a long life resident of San Isidro. And here's what it says. It says, as past prior years and other various meetings regarding the same topic by your site, I'm here giving you suggestions once again. My first priority is a high school, but I know it will be hard, so I have other ideas. There's lots of events, activities, and places for underage of 20 only. And I've been taking our local community teens to other parts of San Diego to enjoy what other cities have to offer. But most of the time, they get discriminated and looked bad at. We need a place for not just a certain group of teens from a street, area, or a complex. There's lots of teens who could do more than what society has done to them because there's not 12 and under. They're not 12 and under. An opportunity for youth to learn something. A swimming pool where more than a few students have to wait years and years before they have the opportunity to learn how to swim, where they can learn year round and no one judging them why they are teens and not learned how to swim. Mechanic class, where most of the teens can learn how to change tires, learn how to do oil changes. See more and more teens have been raised by single moms who have to work. Teens are been left alone doing nothing, with most of them having no father, and small group, and have this all year long. Have a telescope center where gathering of youth can enjoy eclipses at night, watch stars, learn astronomy, space science. A space where they can have a mud race, bubble runs, glow in the dark runs, year-long activities, class on how to build go-karts and then race them. Have a little stable with horses, teach them how to ride horses, farming, agriculture. There's a lot of room at the Beyer Site School to help the youth and the next generation of teens, making sure it's for local children of this community only. I hope you finally do what's best for the children of this school district community. I hope my opinion helped you out on the needs for preteens and teenagers. Thank you. And for the record, I'm gonna forward this text to you, Mr. Mata, that way you have it for the record.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, we just received another public comment. If you'd like would like for me to read it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're here. Yeah, so let's do that one as well.
Okay, this is public comment number 15 or 16, counting Mrs. Espinosa's. This is from Aurora Murillo. Failure notice. Good afternoon, President Martinez, members of the board. The bond that passed and SY property owners are still paying for what was marketed as funds going to rebuild Beyer Elementary School, not for other purposes that should be funded from other tax sources. Aurora Murillo, property owner, 2 properties with multiple units having tenants with children. End of comment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mata.
Sure.
Okay, so with that all said and done, I believe we go to the next steps, Dr. Potter, and that sounds fine. What you just mentioned. So if we want to end there, and then we can continue with that. But I do want to let the public know that we do have the email that's available for people to submit their opinions, and I also hope we reach a point where we can also get opinions from students as well, because that's, I think, a missing part of what we're missing so far. Other than that, I hearing no other comments, or Dr. Potter.
So sorry, Mr. President. Mr. DiCamillo, I just wanted to give you a date and ask if it would be a good date for you. Thursday, April 15th at 6 p.m. That's one of our spring board meetings. Does the April date sound feasible to you?
Perfect.
I mean, for the first draft, and then I would think we would maybe do a second iteration in May.
Sounds good. That's perfect.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
It's
so
also tax day.
that's true. Now
I knew that date sounded familiar.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't thinking of that, but you're right. So I just wanted to put it on your calendar if you wouldn't mind, and give us also kind of.
I'll make sure my taxes are done ahead of time.
Thank you. And then it's we would need the draft at least a week in advance.
Yes.
In order to make we have to post. We have a timeline for posting our agenda. Okay, Mr. President, that's all I had to share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Potter. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, Mr. DiCamillo, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for helping us get, bring some, some solutions, and I really appreciate you. So thank you for everything you've done. And to the board, thanks. For the board, thanks, guys. This is the first special board meeting that we have. I know we have one tomorrow too, so we'll get it done. I just want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And obviously the public who's here listening in, thank you. And please continue to submit your comments. And on that note, I'd like to if there's a motion, I'd like to accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I make the motion.
Okay, we have the motion by Mr. Gurmilan, a second by Mrs. Lopez. Dr. Potter, I see Mr. Gurmilan is celebrating for his motion. Dr. Potter, can you do a roll call vote, please, to adjourn?
Roll call vote for agenda item number 6, adjournment, beginning with board member Irene Lopez.
Yes.
And board member Humberto Gurmilan.
Aye.
And board clerk Rosalia Palasigue.
Yes.
Board vice president Rudy Lopez.
Aye.
And board president Antonio Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, you have a 5-0 vote.
Thank you. And on that note, we're going to be adjourning at 6:24 p.m. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Right,
Good meeting, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mr. Martinez, I don't know where Miss Espinosa